بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, dear students. Today, inshallah, we are going to continue with Unit 4 and we're going to start the first part of Unit 4.2. The title of today's lecture is Meiosis and Sexual Life Cycle. So again, this lecture is quite long, so I divided it into two parts. Today we are not going to go into the details of the phases of meiosis, but we're going to start by giving you a brief introduction about sexual versus asexual cycles, gametes, somatic cells, and all these details so that you are ready for the next lecture, in which we're gonna go deeper into the steps or the details of what happens in each phase of meiosis. So for the lecture outcomes, today we are going to compare sexual and asexual reproduction. What's the difference between them? We are going to distinguish between somatic cells and gametes. We have already spoken about somatic cells last time and gametes as well, but we're gonna speak about them in more details today, inshallah. We're gonna recognize that meiosis reduces chromosome number from diploid to haploid, i.e. from 2n to n. Then we're gonna identify homologous chromosomes, autosomes, and sex chromosomes in karyotypes. Finally, for today's lecture, we're gonna interpret karyotypes. So we're gonna give you a couple of karyotypes, then you'll have to identify if these karyotypes were for somatic cells or gametes, or they were for males or females. All right. The last three lecture outcomes will be covered in the next lecture, inshallah. It says, do these organisms reproduce in the same way? So, does bacteria reproduce in the same way as mammals, penguins, or any other mammals? What do you think? What's the answer to this question? Okay, the answer is no. Of course, they don't reproduce in the same way. Bacteria reproduce asexually, so you just have a single cell that gives rise to other cells. While on the other hand, penguins, they reproduce sexually, which means two parents are required in order to give rise to an offspring. All right, now let's ask another question. How do we differentiate between sexual and asexual life cycles? So what's the difference between sexual and asexual life cycles? Okay, we're going to answer this question in the next few slides. In asexual reproduction, a single individual is the only parent and it passes along all the copies of all of its genes to what? To its offspring. Offspring means the child, okay? معناته الذرية. Okay. As we took examples from last time, you have the starfish example. If this part is cut, then what's going to happen? You're going to have mitosis, which we studied last time, and then it's the part that was cut is going to be replaced by mitosis. And also, if you have a single-celled eukaryotic organism like what is this? Amoeba. It's going to reproduce asexually by mitotic cell division or mitosis, where the DNA is copied and then allocated equally to two cells. Okay, and that's how amoeba divides. Now, in this case, when you have mitosis or asexual, طبعا asexual, we haven't discussed this term. Let me go back. Asexual means, what does A in science or in biology means? It means not. So this is not sexual. Okay? Alright, so in asexual reproduction, the cells that are produced are identical cells. And of course, this makes sense because you've got only one parent or a single individual. Okay, so the cells that are produced are exact copies of the parent cells, and they are produced by mitosis. Okay, and we gave those two examples. And where does asexual reproduction take place? It is mainly in organisms that are unicellular, and it also takes place or happens in some organisms that are multicellular. Remember multicellular? So they are made up of more than one cell. Okay. Now, asexual reproduction gives rise to clone. Clone. What's the meaning of clone? Clone is a group of genetically identical individuals. Okay? بالعربي معناته مستنسخ. Cloning معناته استنساخ. Clone معناته مستنسخ. So basically you have a group of cells that are genetically identical to their parental cell. Okay, when you have cells that are genetically identical to the parent cell, then we call those cells as clones. Okay, now let's have a look at sexual reproduction. Sexual reproduction. In sexual reproduction, you have two parents, and these two parents are going to give rise to offspring that have a unique combinations of genes. Why do they have unique combination of genes? Well, the answer is because you have two parents. So you are mixing the genes from two parents, and that mix between two parents is going to result in a very unique combination of genes that will be different from either one of the parents. Now, the cells that are produced in sexual reproduction are non-identical. They are not identical, and this is logic. Since you have a unique combination, so of course they won't be identical copies to the parental cells. And the cells produced by sexual reproduction, they are not produced by mitosis, but they are produced by meiosis. Okay. Where does sexual reproduction take place? It takes place in multicellular organisms that reproduce sexually, like mammals, humans. Okay? And in sexual reproduction, you have a variation in the resulting individuals of the same species. Variation معناته اختلاف. Okay? So you have differences in the individuals, and again, this is related to the same point of the unique combination. Since you have unique combination of genes, it means you are going to have variation in individuals of the same species. Okay, so for example, uh, you and your brother, okay, won't be exact copies, although you came from the same mother and the same father, right? For example, again, me and my sister are not identical to each other. Even the twins sometimes are non-identical. Okay, so they don't have the exact copies of the genes, the non-identical twins. And you and your siblings are also different because you have variation in the genes. Why do we have variation? Because the division in this case is meiosis. So you are combining the genetic material from two parents, from the dad and from the mom, and then you've got an individual that is unique. He's not a copy of his dad, he's not a copy of his mom, but he is a a unique individual because he has a unique combination of genes. All right, let's refresh our memory with what we covered last time. DNA replication is the same as DNA duplication. Okay, it means you have cell division. Now, this cell division is divided into nuclear division, which is division of the nucleus, and cytoplasmic division, which is division of the cytoplasm. Division of the cytoplasm is also called cytokinesis. Now, for the nuclear division, we have two types of reproduction. One, mitosis, which we covered in Unit 4.1, and the second one is meiosis, which we are going to cover in this lecture and in the next lecture. All right. Okay, now let's have a look at mitosis first. In mitosis, the cells or the daughter cells that are produced can be an entire organism like amoeba. Remember, amoeba is unicellular, so the division of that single cell is going to result in another organism. And mitosis produces somatic cells. What are somatic cells? They are all body cells except for sexual cells. For example, lung cells, heart cells, skin cells, brain cells, these are all somatic cells. On the other hand, meiosis produces gametes. What are gametes? Gametes are the sexual cells that are produced in gonads. Now, the gametes, we call them sperm if they were in male or female. If they were in male. And we call them eggs if they were in female. Okay, so these are gametes and they are produced by meiosis. They are not produced by mitosis, they are produced by meiosis. We're going to see why is that later in few slides. Okay, somatic cells, they are all cells of the body except for gametes. Somatic cells are diploid. They are diploid. Okay, now what's the meaning of diploid? Diploid simply means that they contain two sets of chromosomes. They contain two sets of chromosomes, and this is denoted by 2n. 2n means they have two sets of chromosomes. All right, now from where did they get these two sets of chromosomes? They got one set from the mother and the other set from the father. Okay, so they got N from dad and N from mom, which makes it have 2N, which is two sets of chromosomes, two sets, okay, two sets of chromosomes. How are somatic cells produced? They are produced by mitosis. Let's have a look at this figure. So we have got this cell with how many chromosomes? Two chromosomes, right? Two chromosomes. Okay, now you will have chromosome duplication. Where does chromosome duplication, or in which stage does this happen? In which phase? Yes, in the interphase, specifically in the S phase. Remember DNA synthesis? When chromosomes duplicate, you're gonna have two sister chromatids. Okay, two sister chromatids. They are joined together in this narrow area, which we call a centromere. So these are two sister chromatids, and these are two sister chromatids as well. Then what's going to happen? We are going to separate these two sister chromatids, and we are going to separate these two sister chromatids. Then we're going to end up with how many cells? Two cells. Two cells. Now each one of these cells will have the exact number of chromosomes as the original parent cell. Notice? And this one as well. It's an exact copy. So when the cells are exact copy, what do we call them? We call them clones. Clones. All right. Okay, now let's have a look at gametes. Gametes can be sperm if it was in male, and they are known as ovum if they are found in female. Where are they produced? They are produced in sexual organs called gonads. Okay? Okay, what do we call the gonad if it was in a male? Can you recall? And what do we call the gonad if it was in a female? Remember, gonad is an organ. Okay, gametes are cells. Okay, the gonad in male is called testes, and in female they are called ovaries. Ovaries. All right, now the gametes, they are haploid cells. They are haploid cells. What's the meaning of haploid? Basically, it means they have a single set of chromosomes, just one set of chromosome. Okay, they don't have two sets of chromosomes, they have one set of chromosome. How are they produced? They are produced by meiosis. Okay, let's have an overview of what happens in meiosis. Again, we start with one cell having two chromosomes. Then these chromosomes will be duplicated in the interphase, and we are going to have two sister chromatids for each chromosome. Then in this case, we have two divisions. We have meiosis 1 and we have meiosis 2. We're gonna end up with how many cells? 1, 2, 3, 4. Remember, in mitosis, we ended up with 2 cells. Here we ended up with 4 cells. Now, each one of these cells have how many chromosomes? Just 1 chromosome. 1, 1, 1, 1. We started with a cell that has 2 chromosomes, and we ended with a cell that have 1 chromosome. So that's half the number, and that's why we call it haploid. Haploid, they have just 1 set. يعني if the parent cell had, let's say, 16 chromosomes, then we're gonna end up with 4 cells, each having how many chromosomes? 16 is 2n, right? So you just need to divide it by 2. You're gonna end up with 4 cells, each having 8 chromosomes, which is n, just 1 set. All right? So that's about gametes. Okay, let's look at human life cycle. What is the life cycle? A life cycle, as the name indicates, it's the sequence of stages in the reproductive history of any organism. Okay, so now specifically we're talking about this sequence of events in humans. Okay, humans are sexually reproducing organisms. We already agreed about that. Let's look at what happens first. Okay, first we have a sperm. Okay, a sperm has how many sets of chromosomes? 1 set of chromosome. Now, in this case, n is equal to 3. Okay, but in human cells, human cells, what is n in human cells? What is n in human cells? Can anyone answer this question? N in human cell is equal to 23. But to make it easier and simpler, we will just have, in this case, n is equal to 3. Okay, so the red color indicates the chromosomes from the sperm, and the blue color indicates the chromosomes from the egg or the ovum. Okay, egg or ovum, it's the same thing. Okay, so the first thing that happens here is a process that is known as fertilization. Fertilization. What is fertilization? Fertilization is the fusion of the haploid cells, the fusion of sperm with the egg to produce or to form a diploid zygote. Okay, look at this zygote. Zygote is 2n, which means it's diploid. Of course, it's diploid because how did it form? It's a combination of a sperm with an egg. So you have 1 set from the sperm and another set from the egg. So basically, you're gonna have 2 sets in the zygote, 2 sets of chromosomes. All right, now let's look at this zygote. How many chromosomes does it have? 2n is equal to what? 2n is equal to 6. 2n is equal to 6. Okay, now this zygote will undergo mitosis and differentiation, mitotic division and differentiation. Differentiation means each group of cells are going to differentiate to become more specific in order to form the different organs. So the heart cells will come together to make the organ, which is the heart. The lung cells are going to differentiate to make the lungs, etc., etc. Mitosis is the division. Differentiation is a more specific process in order to make a fully developed organism. which then grows to make an adult, okay, to form an adult. So mitosis and differentiation, of course, you're gonna have the baby first, and this baby is going to grow until it gonna reach the adult stage in several years, of course. Then in that adult, what's going to happen? In that adult, you're gonna have DNA duplication. So here you will have DNA duplication. You can see that now each chromosome is duplicated. Each chromosome is duplicated. Where does this happen? This happens in gonads, remember? Which are the sexual organs. And so these are called what? Sister chromatids. Sister chromatids. Excuse my very ugly handwriting. Okay, then after that, we're gonna have two divisions of meiosis. Meiosis 1 followed by meiosis 2 in order to produce the gametes. Okay, so طبعا it depends. If it's a female, then it's gonna produce an egg. If it's a male, it's gonna produce a sperm. All right, so this is the human life cycle, and you can see that in the human life cycle, we have fertilization alternating with meiosis so that we can keep or maintain the chromosome number constant at 46. That's why we have meiosis, in order to divide the number, okay? And then fertilization is joining the cells again, and then meiosis is dividing the chromosome. That's why the number of chromosomes remain constants over generations and generations that follow. Now let's learn about a new term. This term is called homologous pair of chromosomes or homologous chromosomes. Homologous chromosomes. What's the meaning of homologous chromosomes? Well, it means they are two chromosomes that have exactly the same length. Okay, let's look at the first pair. They have exactly the same length and they have exactly the same centromere position. This is the centromere position. You can see they match each other and they have exactly the same staining pattern. What's a staining pattern? Staining, remember that chromosomes, when they are stained with certain dyes, each chromosome will have a very special or distinctive pattern of colored bands, as you see here in this figure. Let me choose a pen. You can see, for example, this band is the same, this is exactly the same, etc., etc. Okay, so homologous chromosomes, they have the exact staining pattern. They have the same length and shape, and they have the same centromere position. Okay, these pairs can be distinguished from one another, which means if I have, this is one homologous pair of chromosome and this is another homologous chromosome. Let's have a look at this. They have the same length, they have the same centromere position, and they have the exact same staining pattern. Okay, so we can distinguish. If these two were just mixed up, we can say, okay, this is the homologous pair because it has the same length and the other characteristics as well. Now, these homologous chromosomes, they carry genes that control the same inherited character, يعني نفس الصفات. Okay, the same inherited characters. For example, as shown here in this figure, if a gene codes for eye color, if a gene that codes for eye color is present in this location over here, then in the homologous pair, the gene that codes for eye color will be located in the exact same position. Okay? And another term here that you can notice, let me highlight it with green color. Just a second. Okay, you have paternal chromosome. Paternal chromosome is a chromosome that comes from the father. And you have maternal chromosome. Maternal chromosome is the chromosome that comes from the mother. And the same thing here, paternal, maternal. Okay, so the homologous chromosome or the pair of homologous chromosomes, one we inherited from our father and one we inherited from our mother. Why are they special? We keep them together because they control the same inherited character. Okay? The same inherited character. Imagine that the eye color from my father, that I inherit from my father, is brown. Okay? It codes for brown eye color. And imagine the same gene or the gene that codes for eye color, which I inherit from my mother, codes for a blue color. And then together, of course, it depends on the gene itself, then I'm gonna have either blue or brown or whatever. Okay, so the same thing applies for other inherited characteristics. For example, skin color, okay, and other metabolic properties are also inherited in the same way. Okay, now let's talk about chromosomes. Chromosomes can be either autosomes or they can be sex chromosomes. Okay, what are autosomes? Autosomes are chromosomes other than the sex chromosomes. Okay, so all chromosomes that are not sex chromosomes, we call them autosomes. What are sex chromosomes? Sex chromosomes are distinct from each other in their characteristics, and so they are different from each other. Distinct means different. We will see now why they are different. Different. It's the meaning of distinct. And they are represented as X and Y. Okay, now the sex chromosomes, they determine the sex of individual. They determine whether the individual is a male or a female. If the individual is a female, then she's gonna have an XX in all of her cells, and all of her cells will be XX. If an individual is a male, then he's gonna have what? An XY. Okay, now let's look at the X and Y chromosomes. Now, X and Y chromosomes are unlike the other homologous chromosomes. They are not homologous chromosomes. Why are they not homologous chromosomes? Can you answer this question? Why the X and the Y are not homologous chromosomes? Okay, now let's recall the definition of homologous chromosomes. They should have the same length. Does the X and the Y have the same length? No. Of course, the X is much longer than the Y chromosome. That's number one. Do they have the same centromere position? Of course not. Since their lengths are different, then of course the centromere position will be different. Do they have the same staining pattern? Of course not. You can see the staining patterns are also different. So the X and Y chromosomes are distinct from each other. Okay, now these X and Y chromosomes, they determine the individual sex. And if it was, let me change the font color here. Let me select a darker color. If it was a female, then she would have X, X. So these are the same length. Okay. If it was a male, then he would have an X and the short Y over here. Okay. These are sex chromosomes. Okay. All right, now let's look at this karyotype. This image is known as a karyotype. What is a karyotype? A karyotype is simply a picture of a person's chromosomes. Okay? Okay, so this is a picture of a person's chromosomes. Now the question says identify where are the autosomes and where are the sex chromosomes. Where are they in this figure? I'll give you a few seconds to think about it. Okay, you can see the numbers over here. This is number 1. This is number 2, 3, 4, 5, until it reaches number 22. And then you have X, Y, right? Okay, now let's look at number 1. Let's look at the chromosome number 1, which is the first set. Okay, these two chromosomes, they have the same length, they have the same centromere position, and they have the same staining pattern. You can see this is purple, and here is purple, this is yellow, and this is yellow, etc., etc. So these two are homologous chromosome. We inherited one from father and the other one from the mother. And the same applies for number 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, etc., etc., until you reach the end. Okay, so the question says, where are the autosomes in this picture? The autosomes are all of these from number 1 to number 22. These are autosomes. What are autosomes? They are the chromosomes, all the chromosomes other than the sex chromosome. Now, the sex chromosome is very obvious, right? It's here at the end. This is pair number 23. This one is pair number 23. 23. These are the sex chromosomes. Okay, the next question says, is this a somatic cell or it is a gamete? Is this a picture of chromosomes from a somatic cell or it's a picture of chromosomes from a gamete? How would you know? How would you know? Okay, let me give you a hint. Somatic cell is 2n, while gamete is n, one set. And what's the number in a human cell? N is 23. While 2n is what? 46. So just look at the chromosome. Number 1 is 2 chromosomes. Number 2 is 2 chromosomes. So that's 2 times 23 because you have 23 sets of chromosomes. So the answer to this question is what? What's the answer to this question? Of course, it's a somatic cell. Why? Because it has 46 chromosomes. Okay, you have two sets of each chromosome. Number 1, two sets. Chromosome number 2, two sets. Chromosome number 3, two sets, until you reach the XY set. Okay, if you had just an X or a Y, and each one of those was 1, يعني from chromosome number 1 to chromosome 22, each one had only one chromosome, then that would be a gamete. Let's look at the second question. Is this a human male or a female? How would you know? For this one, you just need to check the sex chromosome, which is at the very end. If you notice the sex chromosome, you have X, Y. XY is what? Is it a male or a female? Of course, it is male. Because if it was a female, you would have XX. Okay? Alright, let's take another example. Is this cell a somatic cell or a gamete? What do you think? Alright, it's very obvious. This cell is a gamete. How do you know that it's a gamete? Look at the chromosome numbers. Number 1, just one chromosome. One chromosome. 3 is one chromosome. So that's one set. So that is N. Okay? So the answer is gamete. Why is it a gamete? Because you have 23 chromosomes, which is N, one set of chromosomes. Okay, is the cell from a human male or from a human female? How would you know that? You just need to check the sex chromosomes, which is of course at the very end. دائما السكس chromosome رقم 23. Okay? So in this case it is an X. So the answer is it a human male or a female? يلا انتظر إجاباتكم. Okay? I'll leave it open and I won't give you the answer. I'm sure you all know the answer for this. Alright? Alright, ladies and gentlemen, let's have a review of what we have covered so far in the lecture. Okay, so in human cells, we have somatic cells and we have what? Sex cells, or we call them gametes. Now, the somatic cells will have 23 pairs of chromosome. Pairs. Remember pairs? So that's 2n, right? Two sets or a pair. Now, for this 23 pairs of chromosomes, 22 pairs will be autosomes and one pair of sex chromosome. Now, for the sex chromosome, if it was XX, then that would be a female. If it was an XY, then that would make a male. Let's look at the sex cells. The sex cells has only 23 chromosomes. It's not a pair, it's 23 chromosomes. Now, from the 23 chromosomes, 22 are autosomes and one is a sex chromosome. Now, this sex chromosome, if it was in a female, then it would have X only. If it was a male, then it can have an X or it can be a Y. So now, did you know the answer to the last question? The last question you had a karyotype with an X, right? So the X can be either from a female or it can be from a male. Okay, now, for example, if you had a karyotype, same as the previous one, but at the end you had a Y, then that 100% would be a male. بس بما انه في X طلع لنا X في الإكزامبل اللي قبل، فمعناته كان ممكن يكون female or male. Okay, I hope that's clear. Okay, so what is meiosis? Meiosis is a special form of cell division that produces gametes. Now the gametes are eggs in female and sperms in male. Okay, let's have a look at this figure. So we've got meiosis. Meiosis takes place in gonads, producing sperm cell if it was male, and an egg cell if it was female. Okay, now where does it take place? It takes place in the gonads. What are gonads? They are the sexual organs. Testes in male and ovaries in female. They never take place in somatic cells. Now the chromosomes are duplicated only once before meiosis. Remember where does or when does the DNA get duplicated? It gets duplicated in the interphase. Interphase. Okay, just once. And meiosis includes 2 divisions, unlike mitosis, which includes just 1 division. We have got meiosis 1. In meiosis 1, we separate homologous chromosomes. Okay, we separate homologous chromosomes. While in meiosis 2, we are going to separate sister chromatids. Okay, we'll show you a figure in the next slide and you'll understand this concept or the overview of meiosis better, inshallah. Okay, so this figure shows you the overview of meiosis. Let's start from the top. So we have got the interphase, okay, and here we have homologous pair of chromosomes. How do we know that these two are homologous? They have the same length, they have the same centromere position, and they should have the same staining pattern. It's not clear in this figure because it's just a cartoon, but they should have the same staining pattern. Okay, now the blue chromosome was inherited from the father, I would say, and the red was inherited from the other parent, whatever it is. Okay, so these are individual chromosomes, just 1 chromosome. What's going to happen? These chromosomes are going to replicate or duplicate. Then the homologous pair of replicated chromosomes are going to look like this. You can see we have 2 copies. Okay, now these two are called sister chromatids. Sister chromatids, and these 2 are also called sister chromatids. So now you have a diploid cell that has a replicated chromosome. Diploid means 2n, okay, or 2 sets of chromosomes. All right, now these two sister chromatids are attached. Where are they attached? They are attached at the centromere. Okay, now let's have a look at meiosis 1. What happens in meiosis 1? We are going to separate the homologous chromosomes. So we are separating homologous chromosomes. And in meiosis 1, or the first meiotic division, now we call the cells haploid. So now it is reduced from 2n to n. Okay, that's the first meiotic division, or meiosis 1. Let's look at meiosis 2. In meiosis 2, we are separating sister chromatids. And here again, we're separating sister chromatids. Okay, so now we have haploid cells with unreplicated chromosome. We started with a cell that had 2 chromosomes, and we end up with 2 cells, each one having 1 chromosome. So you can see here that we reduced the number of chromosomes from 2n to n. So the chromosomes, they replicate only once, and the diploid cell divides twice. That's why there is a reduction in the number of chromosomes. So we end up with 4 haploid gametes. Okay, 4 haploid gametes. Okay. So what happens before meiosis in the interphase? Very, very similar to what we have covered in mitosis. The centrosomes duplicate. So you can see we have 2 centrosomes, and the chromosomes duplicate, and each duplicated chromosome will consist of 2 genetically identical sister chromatids that are attached at their centromeres. Let me draw an X here. Oops. So these are sister chromatids, and I'm sorry, that's a very bad drawing. Let me erase it. Okay. So draw it better like this. So these are 2 sister chromatids, genetically identical sister chromatids. They are attached together at their centromere. Okay, so this is basically what happens in the interphase. The centrosomes are duplicated and the chromosomes are duplicated, and the chromosomes now consist of 2 sister chromatids that are joined together at the centromere position. All right, now in the next lecture, we are going to study meiosis in details. Okay, so we are going to cover meiosis 1, and in meiosis 1, we're going to study all the 4 phases, which we call prophase 1, metaphase 1, anaphase 1, and telophase 1. Notice here that we omitted the prometaphase for simplicity. Okay, so prometaphase is not like in the textbook, they don't mention prometaphase. They mention prometaphase only in mitosis, but in meiosis, they don't mention it. In other textbooks, we have prometaphase mentioned in meiosis as well. So for simplicity, we're gonna follow the book, and in the book, meiosis 1 has 4 subphases, and in meiosis 1, we're separating homologous chromosomes. Then in meiosis 2, we're gonna have prophase 2, metaphase 2, anaphase 2, and telophase 2. And in this second meiotic division, we are basically separating two sister chromatids, or we are separating the sister chromatids. Alright, so ladies and gentlemen, this takes us to the end of this lecture. Inshallah, in the next lecture, we're gonna study all the details in meiosis 1 and meiosis 2. Thank you very much for your attention, and I hope you have a lovely day. And see you next time, inshallah, in 4.2b.